We're going to be joined by Jayne Jenkins from Churchill Leadership Group, Shawna Erdmann from Comcast, Victoria Alexander from Signature Healthcare, and Tracy Dodd from Tiffany Company. We've got an all-star lineup here. They're going to be discussing leadership development in a virtual world, obviously a huge topic and really timely topic right now and going into 2021. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the moderator and get us started on this fantastic panel. Jayne Jenkins, she's the founder and CEO of Churchill Leadership Group, and after 23 years as a seasoned Fortune 500 leadership veteran working for AstraZeneca and Sanofi Aventis, she recognized the need to unleash untapped talent in the corporate world. And her years of corporate experience included building and managing high-performance sales and operations team, including more than 120 team members responsible for delivering $600 million annually. And today she's a certified PCP team performance, Clifton strengths, and conversational intelligence coach. Proudly leads their global team of over 200 experts in North and Latin America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Jayne Jenkins. Jayne, go ahead and take it away. Get us started.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm delighted to be here with this wonderful team of experts. So we know that leadership is hard enough normally and particularly difficult this year. So if leadership development is really going to stay relevant, we have to learn how to do it extremely well in a virtual environment. So before we get into the meat of what we will discuss today, and we've all promised to keep our insight that we're going to share with you as practical as we can so that audience can take away a very sort of insight that they can apply. I'm going to ask each of our colleagues to introduce themselves in this way. Your name and organization, the one thing that you're most responsible for in your role, and a fun fact. And I'll share my fun fact. I'll go first. I love big dogs and I had a Saint Bernard, 225 pounds in weight. Shawna, over to you.
Wow, I don't know how to follow that. Maybe all four of my kids' weight will equal your dog, your dog's weight. So I'll start with that fun fact. I've got four kids, 13, 12, 9, and 7. I'm Shawna Erdmann, and so great to be here representing Comcast, and I'm responsible for all learning.
Thank you, Shawna. How about yourself, Tracy?
Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you. So I'm Tracy Dodd. I'm with Tiffany and Company. I'm the head of global talent. I'm responsible for the global strategy, processes, and programs that support the full talent life cycle. And I would say the fun or unusual fact about me is that I love to drive in the rain. I love driving in precipitation.
Wow, didn't expect that one.
A lot of people don't like to drive in precipitation. I actually love it.
Tell us why, just quickly.
It's interesting. It may have something to do with my OCD, but I love the feeling and the consistency of the windshield wiper going back and forth across it kind of brings me comfort.
That's great. Oh, thank you very much for sharing that. Appreciate it. Victoria, tell us about yourself.
Sure. So Victoria Alexander Carney. I'm Vice President here at Signature Healthcare. And let's see, fun fact. I don't know how to follow any of the ones already given. So I'll just say I've been married for almost 2 decades and have 2 wonderful sons. So my fun facts.
Congratulations. All right, then let's get started. My first question is to Tracy. Tracy, in your organization, you recently shifted from an in-person important leadership development program to one that's delivered virtually. I describe that as maybe a learning journey where learning happens over time in a shared environment. And tell us what worked about that. What would you tell the audience in terms of practical insight?
Sure, I'd be happy to share. So everything that we are doing from a talent perspective at Tiffany is grounded in neuroscience, or how the brain works. So thinking very carefully about what's important to humans and how our brains function, it was really important for us as we were transitioning into this COVID environment with everyone working remotely, our stores being closed, that we still engaged our employees and provided them with the opportunity to continue to grow and learn and develop. So we have a leaders at all levels philosophy to our leadership development programs. And That is something that's grounded in neuroscience, in the belief that employees care about certainty, they care about their status, they care about relatedness, fairness. And so the leaders at all levels approach and the ability to shift to a virtual environment really enabled us to be much more inclusive. We shifted to a leadership development program that engaged our leaders by having them apply for the opportunity versus being selected for the opportunity. So that gave them the autonomy and the sense of equal opportunity. So really democratized leadership development. So that journey has provided them with the ability to engage with their peers, which creates that connection in a virtual environment. It creates that connectedness and that relatedness. And there's a real sense of fairness in that everyone has the opportunity to apply for the program.
Thank you. And it's that I'm always very impressed with the added value that comes out of a program when peers can feed off each other. That sort of inclusivity of working together and learning along the way. How have you made it really practical so that what the learners learn is really relevant to the work that they're doing right now?
Yes, well, moving to a leadership journey that's more remote provides you with the opportunity to intentionally organize the content across multiple weeks with peer group check-in calls in between. We call them peer advisory groups. So there may be a cohort of 20 to 25 people who are going along this multi-week journey together, but they are further broken down into smaller peer advisory groups of about 4 or 5. And those peer advisory groups then check in with one another in these individual sessions in between the formal learning modules, and we give them some practical tools, questions to ask, discussion guides, where they can talk about the real application of what they're learning, what the experience has been like. Have you tried that new way of asking for feedback? How did you approach coaching that employee that I know you were having some difficulty coaching? How have you used the tools that we are learning in these modules, and what has been the experience? And it's that reflection of the experience, of the application of the learning, the reflection that you do, getting some coaching and feedback from your peer group, and then trying it again is really what embeds the learning, and it really helps employees to instill the learning and deepen the learning for themselves. And I agree, I think peer cohorts is the absolute best way to approach leadership development.
Yeah, I've been involved in some programs where they're in small peer groups like that, and the groups have continued for months, if not several years after that initial program. And so the power of it speaks for itself. One last small question. It sounded when you were describing the neuroscience, I'm a big fan of neuroscience, and that's why I took the conversational intelligence certification. Is it SCARF that you use? It is. I thought I was like, that sounds like the acronym. You'd recommend that to others to take a look at?
I do actually. This is not a Neuro Leadership Institute conference. We have that one last week, but I've been a partner of the Neuro Leadership Institute and worked with Dr. Rock for many, many years, probably at least 10 or 15. And I highly recommend the SCARF model. It stands for it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And when you think about how you can democratize your leadership development or any of your learning and development programs, it is specifically targeting those things. People's status. I don't have to wait to be selected for a program. I can nominate myself. I can opt in. Certainty is, really an understanding that this development is available for me, and I know that there's something there for me. The autonomy and the ability to say, I want in and I want to be developed as a leader, so I'm going to put myself forward in this process. The relatedness is through the experience and the coaching and working with peers. And the fairness, again, goes back to the fact that this is democratized. Everyone has an opportunity to apply, and that creates that sense of fairness.
Thank you very much, Tracy. We must talk more about that offline for sure. That's definitely a common theme there. Thank you very much for sharing the experience with our audience. Victoria, I know that you are very passionate about engaging leaders in your leadership development programs at Signature Healthcare. And I'm curious, what is it you do to build that level of excitement and engagement? Because it's really hard normal years, right? And it's even harder potentially this year when our leaders are working from home and maybe fatigued and exhausted. So tell us more about what you're doing to build excitement and engagement.
Sure, I'd love to. And it's also really difficult for our industry, especially because it's healthcare, right? And so they're front line, they're exhausted. So in order to build that excitement, what we did is we ensured that our executives were a part of the excitement building. What we do is for our leaders that are in the field, we do these classes, these cohorts, similar to what Tracy was talking about. So it's peer learning, but they come together in different cohorts, and they know exactly what the assignments are going to be. They know exactly how they're going to be graded. We keep a leaderboard, and we talk about that at the very beginning. So going into it, we actually work with our executives to build this idea of, you would have to compete for valedictorian. And we do. We nominate a valedictorian, and we have a valedictorian at the end of every cohort. So there's somebody that wins that prize, and it's coveted in our organization. So we have our executives from very early on actually telling their teams, you better come home valedictorian, right? And it's an encouraging thing. They don't do it in a negative way, but it's a way to build up this idea of the week-long learning that they're going to experience is worth it. It's valuable, and it's something to get excited about.
Excellent, excellent. How do you measure success in your programs?
So we take the competencies for any role that's going through that specific class. So in the case of our administrators, there are specific competencies that we've identified as a part of their requirements for their job. And we take the assignments and make sure that they align with those competencies. And we do it in a variety of ways. Some is group-based assignments, others are individual assignments. And then there's some pre and post testing to make sure that the learning's effective. So some of your more traditional means as well. But we make sure that all of those assignments are put on a leaderboard, and that leaderboard is visible to everyone in the class. So they know exactly where they stand and what they need to do to get ahead.
Visibility. Thank you. I've one other question. Often with these programs, execs may or may not be involved. And we know when executives in an organization really play an active part in a leadership development program, it really can take the program to another level. How have you got executives involved in these programs?
Great question. So we actually do a leaders as teachers model. Our CEO went and actually got his doctorate in education, and he really believes in leaders as teachers. So we have our senior leaders teaching these classes and making themselves available to the students. So the other piece that makes it very exciting and promotes it for these administrators in this leadership development program, or the programs that we do, is that they know they're going to get immediate access to some of the most senior leaders that they might never otherwise meet. And these leaders are very personable. They provide their personal information. They make sure that they're accessible as these leaders are going through the class and working on their assignments. So if there's something that leader is an expert in, the person in the field that's taking the class knows I can call that senior executive and actually can talk with them and learn more about it directly from the person that's an expert in our field. So I think that kind of connectivity brings even a heightened level of excitement about the program for those that are taking it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the work on inclusion and bonding, and the fact that I can feel very sort of bonded to senior executives in the work that I do and the learning. I think that's fabulous. Thank you for sharing, Victoria. Shawna, you also are a fan of democratization of leadership. And when I say that, like in my mind, it's sort of leadership at all levels. Everyone's allowed to be a leader. In fact, when I moved here from the UK 20 years ago, my mentor said to me, leadership is a choice, it's not a role. So what is your definition of democratization of leadership and learning, and what are you doing at your organization to do that?
Sure. You're so right. I either, and I don't remember who said this, but I heard it at some point or possibly read it, but either you're a leader or you're not, period. And it is a choice, and it is a privilege. And I believe that you can lead from wherever you are in the organization, not just because you've been anointed, a special, manager title or leader title. You can lead, start with leading yourself and how you show up, how you're a member of a team and lead on a team, that you don't necessarily have a reporting hierarchy within. You can lead change, you can lead excitement and energy for the task at hand. So no matter where you sit within the organization, you absolutely can be a leader. And that's what the democratization of leadership is all about.
Yeah. And have you made any changes at your organization that really is moving in that direction?
Yeah, well, we're starting by setting expectations globally, and we are really just at the beginning of this. It's new for us from a being deliberate about it. I think this has always been a part of our company's culture, and especially because one of the values we hold so dearly is that entrepreneurial spirit. And so with that, to be successful and have so much innovation within our company, you lead from wherever you are, and whomever has a good idea takes the lead on that. But getting really clear about the expectations that we're setting globally. We're going to use the launch of my experience. We're launching Workday at the beginning of the new year, which is really exciting for us. And really going to take advantage of that performance and talent review cycle to just get specific about the expectations and the behaviors that anyone would exhibit as a leader at any level within the organization. I think the alignment also of all of the our programmatic pieces together with our leadership expectations will really set the tone for us. And then telling the story consistently throughout all parts of our organization. And I think it just, I'm hoping, my hope is that it is going to be embedded into the fabric and culture of our company. We're just being more deliberate about what we're naming it, what we're calling it, and what the expectations are around it.
Yeah, some good progress, and good luck with the rollout
Thank
of Workday
you.
there.
That's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Can I double click a little on
Yeah,
what you're talking about?
Sure.
So when you reflect on the progress so far, it's early days. Were there any sort of standout wins that you'd like to share with the audience, and any sort of risks or concerns, roadblocks that you're concerned about? What's going through your mind?
I think really it's more about the being deliberate about leadership at every level, and the expectation that you have of yourself that, oh, I can actually, you're right, I am a leader. This is what I do, and this is how I'm going to show up. And so I think some of those early wins are really the insights of our individual contributors to really lean into it and understand that they can empower themselves to lead. They don't have to wait to be anointed or told. But I think that spreading that story of the expectations and really being clear about what that is incredibly helpful and useful, especially in the early stages.
Yeah, I'd like to really reinforce what you've just said there, Shawna. One of the critical success factors of effective and sustainable change is the reinforcement of success. And I'm involved in a lot of different leadership development programs, team performance programs across the globe with our clients. And I say at a high level because our coaches are doing the work, not so much me nowadays. And I'm amazed how often successes are happening, but we're not sharing them enough.
Yeah.
And so I'd encourage all of us, our audience, that if you're doing any type of leadership development and there are clear successes that are coming from it, let's say an example of a leader may not be in a leadership role leading other people formally, but is choosing to take the lead and make a difference. And you can share that success story. You really are showing others what's expected, right?
I love that. I
focus on
love it and
strengths.
agree. Yeah, the whole full stop. And I would add to that even that the sharing learnings, key learnings, or what we might label as a failure or a learning opportunity, something to improve, to get better, would be just just as important and exciting to listen to as the success stories. So I love that.
Great, great. I'm going to move on to a couple of other questions now, and they are open to all three of you to respond to, and in no particular order. One of these topics, one of several key themes that I've heard in the last 2 days, is the ability of leaders to be coaches. Now, I'm not talking to the level that some of us are executive ICF level coaches. I'm talking about the ability to turn on a coaching mindset, to have a skill set of coaching skills, such as powerful questions and sharing observations effectively, to do one of two things: to accelerate growth of the talent around you, and also to accelerate performance. And we do that through having better conversations. And so coaching helps us to have better conversations. And most of our typical day, we're in a conversation of some sort, whether it's Zoom, email, one-on-one. And I remember when I learned to be a leader coach back at AstraZeneca, literally it was about 20 years ago. I remember my son's almost 21 and he was born. It really was an eye-opener for me, because up until then I was leading teams thinking I had to have all the answers. And there was an immense amount of pressure on me. And of course I couldn't possibly have all the answers, but I didn't really realize that. And so when people would come to me, I'd be like, really want to help them, etc. And so I think we realize the world has changed and leaders can't have all the answers nowadays. And we're not necessarily closest to our customers. And so the ability to empower others to solve for themselves, to challenge them, really brings out the innovation and the potential in the person. And I know when I learned to be a leader coach and shifted from sort of telling, solving to coaching, I was like embarrassingly shocked how much I'd been holding people back. Right? They're like, oh my God, that's so much better idea than I could have had. And I was like, I was doing that to them. So I guess my question to you all is, do you see leaders being coaches of valuable? And if so, why? And are you doing any of that sort of progressive work in your organization? Who would like to go first?
I'll chime in. First, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think one of the main jobs that you have as a leader of others is developing other leaders. I think that's one of your main priorities. And to do that through coaching, I think is just a tremendous tool to have in your back pocket to know how to have those conversations. I think sometimes we create these coaching programs, though, that are so heavy and time consuming and challenging that they just become overwhelming. And many leaders just don't have time for that. I don't, I'd love to do that, but it's a huge investment. What we're trying to do is just toggle to the easy, small behavior changes, sentences that you can use to gain insights and coach in just in a more simple way. Like, oh, how do you think that went? How'd that go for you? What'd you learn? What would you do differently? I mean, just some super simple things to have in your repertoire of questions, where you don't have to be a fancy coach or have, the big title of that, but just in the way that you have a conversation. There are opportunities every single day. And so arming our leaders of people with those types of questions, I think is easy and simple. And you can have some pretty cool, awesome results versus making it really heavy and time consuming.
I couldn't agree more with you there, Shawna. I mean, leaders already, there's a lot on their shoulders, overwhelmed. So we have to make it easier and more effective for them versus adding to that burden. And I think one of the most powerful skills of a coach is asking powerful questions, which sometimes can be as simple as, instead of asking a powerful question, putting a what or a how in front, right? So it can be very, very simple. And I hope our audience can take something from that. Thank you. Tracy, Victoria, would you like to add anything?
Sure, I would be happy to add. I completely agree with both Shawna and with you, Jayne. And I think that coaching is integral to a leadership at all levels, philosophy and approach. And so what we're doing at Tiffany is very similar to what Shawna explained, is trying to take a less than heavy approach, and one that's very practical and can shift behaviors as quickly as possible. And so we're focusing on growth mindset, the importance of growth mindset, and how coaching to have a growth mindset really opens up the potential for everyone in the organization to be a leader, for everyone to bring innovative and creative ideas, for everyone to speak up and share their thoughts and take a leadership role regardless of level or position. And so with that, we're focusing on peer coaching, right? We're saying coaching that is not just up to the manager to do. It's not just the manager's responsibility to coach. It's all of our responsibility. If you see something, say something. And so we are teaching all employees how to ask these powerful questions and how to be more curious, how to come from a place where you're seeking to understand. And this will help peers coach one another. It will also help untap creativity and innovation and drive business growth. And it will help everyone see how they can be a leader. You know, you can say to people, you're a leader, be a leader. It doesn't matter what role you have in the organization, but sometimes they're like, well, how do I do that? And so equipping them with these simple yet powerful tools shows them how they can be a leader. And so we are also developing and rolling out a new set of expectations, to Shawna's point, level setting and simplifying our competencies. And they're really geared around 3 key things: leading yourself, inspiring others, and shaping the future.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you an extra sort of double click question there on everyone being able to ask such powerful questions, the peer coaching, because my experience is one of the most powerful things that comes out of a leader learning to coach is it goes way beyond just coaching their employees. I remember being in a program once where we were teaching leaders how to coach, and it was the next day. So we'd started the program, and the lady, Kate, she was the CFO, and said, I was in a global meeting last night, so I had to work late. I asked one powerful question that I learned from this program. Best meeting I've ever had, right? Because it really just, she was very much in more in active listening mode and was listening to everything and asked a powerful question that just floored the whole room and had them sort of all reset about the topic they were talking on. And so it really can be a business driver. And she was not in front of any of her employees. This was a peer using a skill with peers. So I cannot sort of agree with you more there, the importance of it and the business impact. The question for you is, as you're getting everyone to do this, how are you rolling that out? Is it sort of organic? Is it a formal program? How are you making it happen? What would you tell the audience?
Yeah, so we're taking a systems approach. I believe very strongly that you have to look at the entire system in terms of how are you communicating expectations. So you're going to obviously communicate out to employees that this is a new leadership model that we're rolling out, but it also has to be embedded into performance management, right? And ensuring that we're embedding it into our systems. It has to be embedded into our interviewing and hiring process so that we can really ensure that as we are interviewing candidates coming in, we're interviewing for growth mindset, and we're setting expectations with all of our candidates around the culture that we're building towards. We're embedding it and integrating it into all of our learning and development and leadership development programs. So we're taking a systems approach and integrating it throughout the talent lifecycle. And yes, we also do have a formal program that we invite people to come to learn how to apply these skills. It's about asking for feedback, giving feedback, and coaching. And so we're starting with our HR business partner community to equip them first so that they can reinforce and sustain the model and the changes that we're looking to make in the organization. Then we are actually engaging our employee resource groups. And so we're taking a very different approach. They are the second pilot audience that we are leveraging for teaching, asking for feedback, giving feedback, and coaching, because we want this to be more about peer-to-peer and more about a growth mindset and not just leader down. And then once we get through those 2 groups, then we're offering it beginning early next year to all people managers and all individual contributors.
That's great with the resource groups. You're the second person I've heard in this last month that really leveraging those groups for learning, shared learning approaches. Thank you. Victoria, would you like to add anything else to leaders being coaches?
Sure, and I'll say this is a bit unique to Signature. I don't know that we're the only organization that does this, but coaching for our stakeholders and we call our employee stakeholders, coaching can have a negative connotation. So one of our disciplinary actions is called a coaching and counseling. So what makes it unique for us is that that term coaching for the average employee means, oh, I've done something wrong, versus an opportunity to have a conversation. So the words that we use in relation to coaching, like active listening, asking open questions, we kind of embed it in through conversations around those topics versus calling it formal coaching. Our executives, of course, recognize what coaching is and definitely value it, so much so that we leverage external coaches and internal coaches to develop our leaders. But going into the idea that everyone has access to a leadership opportunity, we use different terms than coaching, but we definitely embed those techniques into those training and development opportunities. We just call it something different, like learn to actively listen and learn to ask open questions, right? Because we don't want them to have a negative connotation of what coaching is, because it is such a powerful tool. So that's what is unique with Signature.
I think that's real. I've worked with organizations where they want to change what we call it, right? So I think that is real. And if you think back to 25 years ago, people got an executive coach because, you know, they were sort of in trouble, versus today is, oh, I'm top talent, right? They're investing in me. So there's been a shift, but we can't assume that shift is 100%. So the next question I'm going to ask you all is, with the pandemic and how we lead and where we work from, all of those changes, moving into next year to lead successfully in 2021, several of you have talked about sort of expectations of leaders and core competencies. What do you think, it's a two-part question, what do you think is a critical skill for an executive moving forward? And what is a critical skill for a first-line leader to have moving forward? Who would like to go first?
I'll take this first. For me, it's one and the same. What we have seen throughout the pandemic for us is resiliency. And I think that's true for both of them. Where I think there is a divergence is we need strategic thinking from our leaders in a way that we have not asked for it before. We are thinking, especially in our industry, as we see census declines and all kinds of other factors that are regulatory factors, right? Because we work in the post-acute space, we're really trying to think about what does the next 3 to 5 years look like in a way that's completely disruptive to what we understand it today. So strategic thinking has become a big part of what we're asking, not just our most senior leaders, but the leaders that are in the field as well. And then those our frontline leaders, what we're asking of them is to think about the hire of the future, not the hire of today. So a part of that strategic thinking being future focused, right? But it's a little bit different. So oftentimes we're hiring to fill a need that exists today. We're asking them to rethink and say, think about the need of tomorrow. What does it look like in a year from now? Think about the person you want to hire and honestly be in the trenches with you in a year from now, praying that this pandemic is over, right? But recognizing that we've got a little way to go. So who do you want there with you in a year versus today?
Absolutely. And I'm thinking that's almost like a very sort of customer focus as well, because what we need in leaders a year from now will be determined in what our customers and our clients need a year from now, right?
Agreed.
So there's an overlap there. How about yourself, Tracy or Shawna? What about leadership skills for executives and first line? Thank you very much, Victoria.
Well, I agree with Victoria. I think that the skills are the same, whether you're a first line manager or a more senior leader. I think it's the influence, the breadth, the scope, and how much of an impact you make that might vary in terms of the depth of your skill. For me, it's learning agility and empathy. And I think learning agility, if I had to assign one to the senior leader and one to the first line supervisor, I would say learning agility for the senior leader and empathy for the first line. But I think it applies to both groups. I think empathy is really important with leadership right now, and it goes back to the asking the open questions, right? Just checking in to see how people are doing and seeing how we can be flexible and applying common sense to the things that we are doing from a talent perspective, our policies, things like that. And learning agility, I think it connects very strongly to Victoria's comment about strategic thinking. Is, you know, learning agility is the ability to learn from your past experiences and apply it to new and different situations you've never encountered before. And so that is really important, because there are some really unique situations that we're faced with that we've never experienced before. And our leaders are going to need to be really flexible and agile in the way that they approach those situations and how they think about the future.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. You remind me of something that I was talking to someone last week about, and it was scaling the learnings of this last year. I mean, we've all been in situations that many of us have never experienced, and what comes with all of that challenge is a ton of learning. And how within an organization do you scale those learnings for others to benefit from, right? And put some sort of real sort of sustainability in those learnings, because they'll put us in good stead moving forward. Thanks, Tracy. Shawna, what about yourself in terms of competencies, capabilities for leaders?
I love both what Victoria and Tracy said, and I agree wholeheartedly. I'll add on, you know, from the front line, I think empathy for our customers and what our customers are dealing with, and then just a real adaptability. And we've asked so much of our frontline, and they really have responded in a tremendous way. That adaptability and the you know, the ability to shift from being in a physical office building to shifting from home. I mean, just as we all have, but I think there's even more impact on our frontline to make those adjustments. And then I think for leaders, it's probably, I think it's everything, again, that Victoria and Tracy said. And I'll just add the ability to drive clarity when there is no certainty is probably one of the greatest skills a leader can have. You know, there's no way that we can be certain even of tomorrow, but I can be super clear on what I need you to do so that we can get through that uncertainty. And so I think that's probably, and it's hard.
Right.
I'll leave it at that.
I love the way you phrase that. I had to write it down. Ability to drive clarity when there is no certainty. That's very clear. That's very clear, because we're living on this shaky stone, walking on eggshells almost, of a world where there's so much ambiguity in all of our personal lives as well as our work, right? And so what do we know? What don't we know? What do we know we don't know, right? Just being able to hear confirmation and clarity from leaders gives us some sense of security when everything keeps moving. So thank you for that. You mentioned also sort of adaptability, and there's two other sort of questions I have, and I know we're sort of coming up to the end here. The first one is on, we've learned a lot, and for these learnings to stick, we need to know what's learning on an ongoing basis. So we need to be able to measure success in these virtual leadership development programs that we're doing. Is there anything, and one of the things I heard you say, Tracy, was systems. I'm a big systems thinker, particularly with teams. It's no good just coaching the leader of a team and expecting the team to change, because it's an operating system that's going on all on its own. And often the team doesn't know how it's working with each other until you shine a light on the system and see what needs to change and do more of the good stuff. And so part of ensuring sustainable change for a leadership program is when people come out of a program, the system around them supports that new change. So for example, if you go through a leadership development program virtually and learn how to coach, and you come out and your boss is never coaching, chances are you'll go backwards, right? So it's important to know what's working, not during just the program, but even beyond that, so that we can adapt, be agile, and make tweaks. Is there anything that your organizations are doing differently now, sort of pandemic forward, to measure success of programs?
I don't know if it's necessarily different, but I know that we try, and I'm sure Victoria and Tracy probably the same thing just as a learning leader. You're always trying to pinpoint, what's the efficacy? What's the true behavior change that I'm getting? It's always the $1 million question. How does it relate back to behavior change that pushes the business forward or gets your business to grow? And I think many have tried, and we've got great, probably a lot of the same metrics that others do. I don't think that we've quite nailed it yet, but I think that what we are shifting towards now more as a learning and development organization broadly, meaning, including Victoria and Tracy and many, many others, as we start to think about what the skills are and how you apply certain skills within a job, and that how that can drive your success versus going to a program and is this person successful now because they went to the leadership program. It's more, gosh, this person has all these great strengths. Let's leverage those strengths and match them to the role so that it's more organically adapted to that particular person. And then what are some of the little holes that we need to plug from a skills perspective, and how can we do that in the most efficient and an effective way so that person gets to practice on the job. We can get real-time feedback on how they're doing and continue to move them on in their progression. And I think the secret sauce is probably in the future going to be, how do we sort of marry these skills together in groups or bunches versus, Shawna needs to learn communication skills. Well, it might not just be communication. It might be communication together with the empathetic view, with the ability to drive clarity. So how do we, mush all of those together in an effective way and deliver those in a package? Is I think the one-off hits of skills, I think we're going to find are going to be challenging. So you can't do anything with just butter, but if you have butter and sugar and eggs and flour and some meat, I can make a whole lot of things versus just having one ingredient.
I still wouldn't know what to do with butter, sugar, and flour. So you're well above me, but you're making me hungry. Thank you. Shawna, just to double click on that, are you talking about really individualizing learning?
The personalization. I think it's so key. I think, and I say this all the time to my org, we expect things to be personalized to us. No matter what we do or where we go to get our coffee, I expect it to be made the way I want it to be, the way I ask for it to be made. And when we come into work, we don't stop being consumers. We expect to have our learning developed and delivered in a way that is most effective for the way that we learn. I might learn through videos. You might prefer to read a document. Someone else might prefer to have some social interaction or practice in a lab. So how do we get really smart about asking and knowing and tracking and then developing the types of learning that can be applied in those different modalities or different ways when I'm going to have your attention? And I think that's going to be the most effective. I think gone are the days where you get the major, from your college university or your corporate university. We're more focused on how we bundle these skills to you in the flow of your work so that you can be the most effective leader that you can be, or individual contributor that you can be.
Yeah, I think you just opened up a conversation that could take 10 hours, right? I don't think my chemistry's done me any good in my career. Okay, let's hear from one other, Tracy or Victoria, around measuring success. And then I have a quick fire question for you all, and we'll pass back to Bobby.
Sure.
Tracy, Victoria, yep.
Victoria, did you want to jump in there? Okay. So I absolutely agree with Shawna. I would say that there's nothing different or new that we're doing because of the pandemic or working virtually. And I'll just dial in very briefly and quickly because I know we're ending out of time. But if we think about leadership development and the measurement impact of that, and we think about the systems approach that we talked about, one thing that we're doing, and again, not unique or different because of the pandemic, but one thing that we're doing that I think might be helpful for others to hear about is engaging the manager of the participant along the journey. Setting those expectations up clearly at the beginning of, this is what your employee is going to be going through. This is the experience. This is what they'll be learning. This is the content. This is why. Here's how you can support, coach, and reinforce it. here's a discussion guide for things you should be talking about with them, questions you should be asking. And then reinforcing the coaching methodology there, right? And reinforcing asking open-ended questions and asking powerful questions about that learning journey, and then checking in with that manager along the journey, and then doing the follow-up afterwards. And we do use surveys, and we're just very thoughtful about that because we don't want to create survey fatigue, but we do use surveys throughout the process, both for the participant and for the manager of the participant, to really check in and see how things are going. And then we can use that as a way of measuring whether or not the transfer learning is being applied.
Thank you. We're hearing the coaching then, again, right? The accountability, the sustainability of a program by involving the leader of the participant. Thank you very much, all of you. My quick fire question is this, and one of the coaches that I work with talked this week about renewal, leadership renewal. And I was like, what does that mean? And he says he's been talking to a lot of senior executive C-suite leaders around how do we help leaders overcome the fatigue and exhaustion that they're going through. Everyone's zoomed out or something like that. And many of us are working more hours. So what is the one thing that either you're doing or you might do to renew your leaders in this virtual world? Shawna, anything come to mind?
My quick response that's just right from the gut is stop wearing the badge of busy and thinking that all the busyness is so good. The more that we perpetuate that as individuals, I just think it's not healthy. And I think it's okay to role model, I'm taking a day off for my mental health, or no, you're not calling in on your PTO day. You take that day and you take it. And so I think you have to role model it at every level that it's okay to have a break.
Oh, I love it.
Really take it.
Love it. Thank you. Tracy?
Yes, along with that, similar theme to what Shawna shared is trying not to schedule back-to-back day, which I think is a really big problem that many leaders and organizations are facing. And it's so much easier now with people all being virtual or mostly virtual to schedule these back-to-back Zoom or Microsoft Team calls where you're expected to be on video all day. And, and I've said to my husband on a number of occasions, I have to get out of this chair. I'm in this chair, 14 hours a day. I can't sit in this chair anymore. So really making sure that we're not scheduling and overscheduling ourselves back to back to back, and being able to get up and take a walk, go outside for some fresh air.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tracy. Victoria?
Really give a gift that they can't use unless it's in a relaxing environment. So for example, bath salts, send the gift of bath salts, right? You can't really work while taking a bath, hopefully not. But so when you give a bottle of wine or the bath salts or a picnic basket, you are reminding them it's okay to relax and take a break. So sending those kind of gifts that are nice, gentle reminders that they also can't leverage unless they're in a relaxing place. So that's ours.
I love that one. I will take the wine, please, Victoria. I'll reinforce, I think where Tracy was going is movement and breathing. I'm a big meditation, mindfulness advocate for many, many years. And I even find my husband now, although he absolutely says he doesn't do meditation, lying on the bed, not asleep, practicing mindfulness without even knowing he's doing it. So with that, thank you, ladies, very, very much indeed. Let's go back to Bobby.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. Actually, I wanted to get a couple of questions in here. One that was posed early on in the discussion. I'm not sure who to direct it to. I didn't make a note of the timing of when it came in, so I'll let you, Jayne, go ahead and figure out who's going to be taking the question if in fact you don't want to. But the question was, what are you doing differently for your leaders during the pandemic to provide them with knowledge, skills, and tools needed to lead in the new normal?
I'll take a quick stab. In our learning journeys that we tailor and deliver to clients, we've really emphasized on usually in our conversations with HR is, how do you know this is the right, most important thing that your leaders need right now? Because it's easy to make assumptions around some general observations. And so we've been doing more interviews of participants to engage them as stakeholders in the learning, to prioritize what they want to learn right now. So it's really just in time learning. Who else would like to add?
I will add that we had already been on a journey of becoming the next generation luxury jeweler and had already been thinking about what future leadership behaviors need to look like, and had already been on that journey of upskilling and training and coaching leaders around new ways of leading in the new environment. And it actually became even more applicable with the pandemic and with working virtually. Some of the behaviors that we had previously identified as being important to us for the future are the very relevant behaviors that are needed now. The future is now. So it's just really an acceleration of that development and that coaching, but the behaviors really haven't been any different.
Anyone else like to add?
Go ahead, Victoria.
I was just going to say, I think the question was, what are we doing differently to develop them? And, obviously, I think everyone's leveraging technology in a different way. But I think what is unique that we're trying to do different this time go round is that we are constantly recalibrating. It used to be that you might look at your competencies and you might look at what you needed to adjust every year or so. We're doing it rapid cycle. So every school is slightly different than the one before, because we're learning from the class before what we missed, or what, additional information they would have liked to have known that we didn't. And then on top of that, we go back to the previous class and we say, okay, you said that this was something you were missing. We're going to do a micro learning session around that specific piece. So it's a lot of rapid cycle design and constant improvement versus that I'm going to review it once a year.
Yeah, I love that agile approach.
If I could add on to that, Victoria made me think of the fact that one of the things that we are doing that's different, and again, not because of the pandemic, but because of the need to shift our leadership behaviors and propel the organization forward, is we're using Agile. And Agile in an HR and learning function is unique and different. And I come from technology, so that's my influence here on luxury retail. So to Victoria's point, it's that the iteration and the ongoing continuous improvement, rapid pace with small scrum teams.
I know, can I get her names? Is part of that adaptability or kids walking in your office home from school? Always adaptable. One of the things that we did, which was really useful for the shift to work from home, because so many of our frontline teammates had not worked in that type of environment before, and so we created some different virtual reality type of learnings to interact with an office and what your background might want to look like and how you might want to arrange your camera and lighting and things that are just useful to have effective meetings online. So something super simple, but it was really effective.
All right. And I know you guys were just talking about being stuck in front of the computers for 14 hours and all that good stuff. And I actually just muted myself a minute ago. My 14-year-old daughter was making a little bit of noise. I was hoping wasn't going to flow into the conversation here. But I wanted to ask one more, if it's okay for you. And I think it should be relatively quick and easy to answer. And I know we had kind of discussed this pre-event. But how, just so everybody in the audience knows, how do you measure success with remote leadership development programs? How do you measure it?
I'll go first on that one. We actually tie every one of our competencies to a specific kind of ROI with the business results. So for example, and this is a lot, but we are such a data-driven company that every month for every facility that we run, we have an average of about 50 pages of data points that we measure and look at. And so we generally will say, okay, well, this competency we think is going to affect this the most. And so we actually tie our leadership development programs into what changes we see in the next quarter, not the next month. We know it takes a little bit longer to actually implement some things, but generally speaking, we will evaluate them in the next quarter or two on how they're moving data points that we believe those competencies that we trained on would influence.
Yeah. And Bobby, I'll add to that because we talked about this a little a few minutes ago. We touched on measuring success is knowing people are exhausted, knowing people want to be engaged. I think a couple of things that we've been doing with clients is really measuring the engagement and how can the engagement improve for them, right? Not making any assumptions. And one of the other things as well is we're also busy making the mind shift from activity to impact. So Victoria talked about, I love straight away you went business impact, right? And sometimes it's really hard to match behaviors directly to an immediate business result. And I come from like leading a P&L, and the business result for me is what comes first, and working backwards. And so in the conversations, in the questions we ask of measuring success, it's very much of what have you done differently? How did that impact the business, or how did that impact your employee that they impacted the business? And often that's a struggle for leaders to answer because they're not thinking that way. They're thinking about what I did. So getting the mindset shift for them to constantly think, not a one-off event survey of measuring success, but getting them to constantly think about, what am I doing? What was the impact? How did that impact our customers? And having them come back to this learning journey when they're in cohorts to talk about those successes in those terms. And it's really working well.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Jayne, and appreciate all the insight. All we can say about this panel is wow. As anticipated, that was some tremendous discussion around the essential elements of an effective virtual leadership development program. Loved all the takeaways about creating the programs, particularly with remote engagement, which is obviously really important now. So on behalf of everybody in the audience and us at Opal Group, thank you so much for joining us for the panel, everyone.
Thank you.